On March 14, 2024, Tom Hanks reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellow, crumpled at the edges. He held it up to the studio lights like it was evidence in a trial. Jimmy Fallon leaned forward, smiling, the way he always does when a guest is about to tell a good story. But Tom didn't smile back. He said 5 words. "Jimmy, I need to read this." And for the first time in 11 years of hosting The Tonight Show, Fallon looked away from the camera. Not because something was funny. Because something broke. The show that night had started like every other Thursday taping. Audience seated by 4:45. Warm-up comedian done by 5:10. Fallon ran through his monologue cards backstage, circling punchlines with a red marker. Tom Hanks was the lead guest, his 9th appearance, a familiar face, an easy night. The producers had prepped the usual segments. Standard. Safe. Predictable. Tom had other plans. When Tom walked out, the audience erupted the way audiences always do for Tom Hanks. Immediate, warm, unconditional. The first 3 minutes were classic Hanks. Self-deprecating humor. A bit about losing his reading glasses inside a breadbasket at an Italian restaurant. Fallon laughed. The band played a short riff. Everything was moving on its usual rails. Then Tom shifted in his chair. He placed both hands flat on the desk and said, "Jimmy, can I tell you something that isn't on the card?" Fallon nodded. "Always." Tom reached into his pocket. What Jimmy didn't know, what nobody in Studio 6B knew that night, was that Tom Hanks had called the show's executive producer 6 days earlier. It was a Sunday. Tom made one request. "Don't tell Jimmy what I'm about to do. He needs to hear this cold." The producer asked why. Tom paused for a long time. Then he said, "Because it involves someone in his building." The letter Tom unfolded was handwritten. Blue ink on yellow legal paper. The creases had turned white from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times over 2 decades. "I got this letter," Tom began, "from a 9-year-old girl in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Her name was Emma. Emma Whitfield. And she didn't write to Tom Hanks. She wrote to Forrest Gump." A few people in the audience chuckled. Tom didn't. The letter said, and I'm paraphrasing because parts of it are private, it said, "Dear Mr. Gump, my daddy is sick. The doctors told my mom he isn't going to get better. He has something called ALS. I don't really understand it, but his hands don't work anymore and sometimes he can't talk. But when we watch your movie, he laughs. He always says, if Forrest can run, maybe I can too. Mr. Gump, can you please tell my daddy to stop running and come home? Because I think he's been running from us and I want him back." The studio went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has a physical weight, that presses against your chest. Tom folded the letter back along its creases. "I read that letter at my kitchen table in Los Angeles. 7 in the morning. My coffee went cold. I sat there for 45 minutes. He didn't just write back. He went to his garage, set up a camcorder on a tripod, put on a plain white shirt, and dragged a wooden bench into his backyard. He sat on it the way Forrest sits, knees together, hands in his lap, and pressed record. He spoke directly to Emma's father, David Whitfield. He said, "David, your daughter asked me to tell you to stop running. But I think you already have. I think the bravest thing a man can do isn't to run across the country. It's to stay in one room, in one bed, and let the people who love you hold on." He shipped the tape to Scranton with a box. Inside, a pair of white Nike Cortez sneakers, the ones from the film, and a handwritten note to Emma that read, "Your daddy isn't running. He's standing right next to you. Love, Mr. Gump." Fallon pressed his hand against his forehead. He was quiet, but you could see his jaw tighten. "David Whitfield died on October 19th, 2003, Tom said. The date came out steady, rehearsed, the way you say a date you've carried for a long time. 6 weeks after I sent that tape. Emma's mother told me they played the video every single night for those last 6 weeks. And every night, Emma took those sneakers and placed them beside his bed. Like they were waiting for him to get up and walk. Tom set the letter on the desk between them. He looked at Fallon, a long, deliberate, unmistakable look. The kind of look that says, "I'm not done, and you're not ready for what comes next." Now, Jimmy. That's a sad story. And I've carried it for 21 years. But that's not why I'm here tonight. Fallon's posture changed. What do you mean? I mean the story doesn't end in 2003. 3 months before this taping, Tom received a second letter. Same yellow legal paper. Same blue ink. But the handwriting was different, steadier, more confident. It was from a 30-year-old woman named Emma Whitfield. The same Emma. The girl from Scranton, now grown. She wrote to tell Tom she'd kept everything. The sneakers sat in a glass case in her apartment. She digitized the tape and watched it every year on October 19th. But she wasn't writing to say thank you. She was writing to tell Tom something she'd never told anyone outside her family. She said that after her father died, her mother fell apart. Tom continued. They lost the house in Scranton. Emma moved between relatives. She dropped out of community college twice. She worked at a gas station. Then a grocery store. Then she cleaned offices at night. No money, no direction, no plan. He pointed to the letter on the desk. But she had one thing. She told me, Mr. Hanks, when I was 9 years old, a stranger sat on a bench in his backyard, pressed a button on a camera, and talked to my dying father like he mattered. Like his life was worth 20 minutes of your time. You didn't just send a tape. You sent proof that strangers can save each other. Tom took his glasses off. That belief is what drove Emma to study media production. She taught herself Final Cut on a borrowed laptop. She worked minimum wage jobs for 6 years while building a portfolio. And eventually she applied for a position at a television studio in New York City. Tom stopped talking. Fallon stared at him. Tom said, She applied here, Jimmy? At the Tonight Show. The audience murmured, a low, rolling wave of realization, the sound of 400 people connecting 2 dots at the same time. She's been on your post-production team for 14 months. Tom said. Her name is Emma Whitfield. She edits packages for your show. You've probably passed her in the hallway. And neither of you knew. Fallon sat back. He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture the audience had never once seen in 11 years. This wasn't a performance. I didn't. He started. I had no idea. I know. Neither did she. She doesn't know I'm telling this story tonight. Backstage, in a monitoring room, a young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail sat on a folding chair watching the live feed. When Tom Hanks said her name, her hand went to her mouth. The 2 producers beside her had been briefed 30 minutes earlier. They understood why now. But Tom wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a small, square photograph, faded, soft at the corners, washed to a pale golden hue. This was taken in 1998. It's a picture of Emma's father, David, standing outside a movie theater in Scranton. He's smiling. He's holding 2 ticket stubs. Tom turned the photo toward the nearest camera. And standing next to him, arm around his shoulder, laughing, is his best friend from high school. A man named James Fallon. The gasp from the audience was sharp. A collective inhale, 400 chests pulling air at exactly the same time. Fallon's hand went rigid. His eyes locked on the photograph. That's... He stopped. His voice dropped to a whisper. That's my dad. Jimmy, David Whitfield and your father grew up 3 blocks apart in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. They went to St. Agatha's together. Your dad was a groomsman at David's wedding in 1982. They lost touch in the late 80s. Your father never knew David got sick. And David never knew that his best friend's son grew up to be the man sitting in this chair. There is a moment, engineers who work in live television will tell you this, when a studio stops being a studio. The lights don't change. The cameras keep rolling. But something shifts. The space becomes a room. Just a room with people in it. Fallon pressed both palms flat against the desk. The audience could see his shoulders rise and fall. For 17 seconds, the longest sustained silence in the modern history of The Tonight Show, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. Then Fallon laughed. Not a joke laugh. A pressure-release laugh. The kind that comes when the body doesn't know what else to do with everything it's holding. "My dad," he said, shaking his head. "My dad never told me about David." "People lose touch," Tom said gently. "They move. They get busy. They always think there's more time. And then one day there isn't." Fallon wiped his eyes with his sleeve and exhaled. "You know what's wild? My dad would have loved you. He would have sat right there and talked to you for 3 hours." Tom smiled. The first real smile he'd allowed himself all segment. "I think he would have talked to David for 3 hours first." Fallon laughed again. This time the audience joined, a warm, collective, much-needed exhale. "This is live television, ladies and gentlemen," Fallon said. "No script. No rehearsal. Just Tom Hanks completely destroying me on a Thursday night." Tom raised both hands. "Hey. I'm a storyteller. That's all I did." "No." Fallon's voice was firm. "You carried a 9-year-old girl's letter in your pocket for 21 years. That's not storytelling. That's something else entirely." Fallon looked toward the side of the stage. "Is she here? Can she come out?" The applause started small, a few people in the front rows, then built until it filled the room from floor to rafters. A door opened backstage. Emma Whitfield stepped onto the studio floor. 30 years old. Gray Tonight Show crew jacket. Staff lanyard around her neck. Eyes red but smiling, the kind of smile that fights its way through everything trying to pull it under. Fallon stood. He crossed the stage in 4 steps and wrapped her in a hug. Her fingers pressed into the back of his jacket like she was holding on to something that might disappear. Tom Hanks stayed in his chair. He didn't stand. He watched, the way a man watches when he knows his part in the story is done. When they separated, Fallon held her at arm's length. "Your dad and my dad were best friends. And you and I have been working in the same building for 14 months. He shook his head. "I don't believe in coincidences anymore." Emma looked past him, at the audience, the cameras, the desk where a yellow letter sat folded between 2 coffee mugs. She took one breath and said the only thing that mattered. "My father used to say that the right people find each other. It just takes some of them a little longer." If this story moved you, subscribe and share it, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The cameras held on Fallon's face for 3 more seconds. He didn't speak. He placed his hand on the desk, 2 inches from the letter, and left it there. Later that night, after the audience filed out, a stage manager named Ray DeLuca sat alone in row 22. A colleague asked what he thought. Ray looked at the empty stage for a long time. Then he said, "I've worked in this building for 19 years. But tonight was the first time I watched Jimmy Fallon forget he was on television. And that's the first time the show felt completely real." Ray finished his coffee. He crushed the paper cup slowly in his hand and stood up. But before he left, he looked back one more time at the desk, at the spot where the yellow letter had been. It was gone now. Someone from the crew had placed it in a clear plastic sleeve and left it on Fallon's chair in his dressing room, next to a bottle of water and an unwrapped granola bar he never touched. Down the hallway, in the post-production suite where she had spent the last 14 months cutting segments and syncing audio, Emma Whitfield sat alone. The monitors were off. The room was dark except for the blue standby light on her editing console. She had taken off her lanyard and placed it on the desk in front of her. Her phone buzzed, once, twice, 7 times. Messages from friends, from cousins, from her mother in Scranton who had watched the live stream on her tablet and hadn't stopped crying since. Emma didn't answer any of them. Not yet. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Tucked behind her driver's license, folded into a square no bigger than a postage stamp, was a photograph she had carried since she was 16. It was a copy of the same photo Tom Hanks had shown on camera, her father and James Fallon, standing outside that movie theater, arms around each other, laughing at something neither of them would ever remember. She unfolded it carefully and held it under the blue light. Two men. One afternoon. A friendship that ended without a goodbye. And then, 21 years later, finished its sentence in a room full of strangers. Emma placed the photo on her editing desk, next to her lanyard, next to the keyboard she used every night to cut together moments for a show hosted by her father's best friend's son. She sat there for a long time. Then she whispered something so quiet that only the empty room heard it. "Hey, Dad! I found them!"